So throwable toys. It's pretty simple, pretty cool, pretty straightforward. You spawn an object in like this brick, you pick it up, and you throw it. A bit better than I did, but you get the point. So in this video, I'll go over all the options and how to use them, just in case you have any questions about how things look, how to use things, as well as explain some of the little nuances that kind of linger with these kind of prefabs, right? So the first thing I'll do is give you a little first-person view. That way you don't have to look at my deformed body. Here we go. So, first option, when you open up your menu that we're going to look at, is going to be the enable option, right? So when you enable it, it's going to spawn whatever object you set the thing to spawn where you set it at. To change the object, you go to inventory, and you can pick whatever of these you want. I'm going to choose this ball here, and now I have this ball in my hand. I'm going to go back, and the next option I'm going to look at is going to be color. You move it around, and it changes the color. Pretty cool, pretty simple. Size, click it, move it around, all that fun stuff, and it changes the size. Next option here, world collision sound effects. This enables sound effects in general, as well as basically when it hits the world it makes a sound, right? So if I drop this ball over yonder, it'll make sounds when it hits the floor. If you have a low frame rate or something, you might not hear the sound every time it bounces. That's just kind of how collision works with avatars and stuff. It's not perfect, but you know, we do what we can. But yeah, it is dependent on frame rate. So if you have really low frame rate, you might hear it skip the sound when it bounces. The next option is player collision. So when you are holding, when you're holding an object, I keep grabbing my shirt, but when you're holding an object, and you walk up to a player, if you hit their head or their torso, it'll do the sound, the bouncing sound, right? You might be hearing double right now. That's because I have two instances of VR chat open, so just don't mind that. But yeah, so you can go ahead and hit someone and it plays a sound. Basically, you have the ball. If you hit them in their head or their torso and you throw it at them, it'll bounce off their body, right? So a little boop, boop. It's pretty cool. But that's what that option does. Moving on, we have the spawn locations. So earlier, right, when I disable and enable it, it spawns the ball in my right hand. You can change it to where it's in your left hand. Or you can change it to where it's in the world. When it spawns in your right hand or your left hand, you might notice the ball feels a little more stickier the first time you drop or let go of the ball. If you want to avoid that, then you could choose in world. Otherwise, when you let go of the ball, it might not be as reactive other times. So the first time you let go, it might not be super reactive, but every other time after that, it will be, unless you choose the in-world option. Moving on, we have the advanced settings. So these are like kind of, you know, it says it here, sensitive, experimental, it could break things. The main ones you're going to be using is probably going to be remote player throwing and object mass. So remote player throwing, basically by default, I believe this is off. And so what happens is when another player grabs your object and lets go, it's going to drop it in place, right? So if this is my object here, if I could, yeah, there we go. So if this hat is my object, right? If I'm the other player and I let go, it's going to keep that object in place just like this hat, right? It's not going to do anything. However, if you turn on remote player throwing, then what happens is that they could actually throw the ball and the ball will drop and fall. So like it'll basically behave the way you use it. However, because this is kind of the iffy part, right? Why it's in this menu is that it's not super consistent. Um, it relies a lot on ping, and because of that, when people throw the ball, the throw might be really weak, or it might not throw at all. It might just straight up drop, even though they do the whole throwing motion and everything. It might just straight up drop and do nothing. It'll set bounce around. To get around that, well, I don't know, you can't really get around that. I guess you can. Basically, what you have to instruct them to do is when they throw the ball, right? So when they throw the ball, they have to pause at the end of their throw and then let go. The more ping they have, the longer they have to hold and then let go. If they have a little ping, right, low ping, then they don't have to hold pause as long. They'll let go, and that'll throw the object fine. So I probably should have set this. So for when you throw the object, basically, if you're on index controllers, I highly recommend you have your gestures on. Although I don't think you'll need it, but if you have them on, even better. It'll work a lot better for you. Quests, and you kind of have to have your gestures on. Yeah, so basically you make a fist to grab an object, and you open hand to let go, right? Yeah, I don't know how else to explain how to throw something, I'll be honest. Yeah. The next option is going to be object mass. So, if you have something heavy, like say a brick, maybe you want to increase it so it throws more like a brick, right? It feels heavier when you throw it. However, if you have something like a paper airplane, it doesn't make sense for it to drop like a brick, right? So what you might do instead is lower the mass, and so now it throws more like a paper airplane. And so one thing I mentioned, right, was if you have it in right hand or left hand, the first time you let go feels sticky. So what you probably noticed me doing is I dropped it and then immediately picked it up like this. And this makes it so that when I let go the next time, it's not sticky and it actually throws exactly the way I want it to throw. So if I throw it, it throws it. If you have something like Quest controllers, which I use, right, sometimes when you do an open hand, it might not always open your hand all the way. And so what happens is that you're gonna get the object stuck in your hand. But if you manage to drop it and then grab it real quick, now whenever I do it again, it'll be way more consistent. So that's just what that was, in case you were wondering. Yeah, that's object mass. Next one is falling acceleration. Basically, this just makes it so that when it falls super slowly or it falls really fast. You really don't want to touch this. Just keep this at 98%. I'm just going to be honest with you. Don't touch it. Keep it 98%. Play with it if you want, but 98%, that's where you want to keep it at the majority of the time. Throwing power, if how strong your throw is, you can play with it. You'll see what it does. But again, sensitive, experimental, can break things. Keep that in mind with this menu. It's here for in case you want to use it, but I wouldn't recommend touching it. Yeah, that's it for the menu. If you have any other questions or something, other than why I use locomotion on my avatar and walk around like this, then feel free to message me on Discord at ThatFactedMom. And yeah, I hope you have fun with it. If you have any other questions, then yeah, message me.